The Royal Gorge Incident. On October 5, 2003, the Royal Gorge Bridge in Canyon City, Colorado was lined with spectators. The suspension bridge hangs 955 feet above the Arkansas River. Dwain Weston, a 30-year-old Australian professional base jumper, stood in an aircraft above the gorge. He was a pioneer in the sport, known for treating gravity as a solvable puzzle. Before the jump, he turned to his flight partner and remarked, quote, "Just remember, whatever happens, happens." The stunt was designed as a precise intersection. Weston planned to fly over the bridge while his partner flew underneath it. The margin for error was vertical space. Weston exited the aircraft and accelerated toward the canyon floor. He deployed his wingsuit, building forward speed to approximately 100 miles per hour. As he approached the bridge, the geometry of his flight path began to close. The wind conditions in the gorge differed slightly from his calculation. His trajectory was lower than intended. As the bridge deck rushed closer, Weston recognized the error. He attempted to flare his suit, changing the angle of attack to convert speed into lift. The suit responded, but the closing speed was too great for the remaining distance. The physics of the turn could not overcome the momentum of the descent. Weston struck the bridge railing at full velocity. The impact severed his leg and caused massive blunt force trauma. The force of the collision deployed his parachute, but he had already sustained fatal injuries. He drifted down to the canyon floor where he was pronounced dead. The footage, captured by spectators, confirmed that visual estimation of a glide slope is insufficient when traveling at terminal velocity. The testing accident. On April 13, 1998, Patrick de Gayardon, a 38-year-old French inventor, stood at the open door of an aircraft over Hawaii. De Gayardon was not just a pilot, he was the primary architect of modern wingsuit flying. He built his own suits, constantly refining the aerodynamics to allow for longer, more controlled flights. For this jump, he was testing a specific modification he had sewn himself. He had altered the container system, the backpack that holds the parachutes. He added a new deflector to improve airflow over the leg wing, believing that it would make the deployment cleaner. He trusted his own stitching implicitly. The design had been refined in theory, but the rig had to survive real deployment forces. He exited the aircraft and entered the slipstream. The wingsuit performed as expected during the freefall phase, gliding over the Pacific Ocean. At deployment altitude, de Gayardon reached back to pull the pilot chute. The small chute caught the air, intended to pull the main canopy from the container. But the modification he had sewn created a mechanical conflict. A line snagged on the new stitching. The entanglement prevented the main parachute from extracting. He attempted to cut away the main chute to deploy the reserve. However, the rigging error caused the reserve to tangle with the malfunctioning main system. The entanglement was complex and unrecoverable. De Gayardon struck the ground without a functional canopy and died on impact. The investigation concluded that the flaw was not in the suit's aerodynamics, but in the single manual modification to the container rigging. The Red Bull Champion Incident. On October 8, 2013, Victor Kovats stood at the exit point on Tiananmen Mountain in Hunan Province, China. The terrain is defined by sheer vertical drops and narrow forested canyons. Kovats was a three-time Hungarian national champion competing in the World Wingsuit Championship. He was an experienced veteran who focused intensely on technical precision. He looked out at the valley, analyzing the flight path through the gorge. The course required navigating a complex line through the canyon. Kovats leaped from the cliff. His suit inflated and he began to glide. Initial flight telemetry appeared normal. However, the wind inside a narrow gorge is often invisible and erratic. Mid-flight, his stability broke. A sudden shift in air pressure or a gust disrupted the airfoil shape of his suit. He lost the clean lift required to maintain his line. His trajectory dipped. The canyon walls were too close to allow for a recovery dive. He attempted to correct the bank, but the ground rose to meet him. Kovats plummeted into the dense forest below the cliff line. He struck the terrain with fatal force. Rescuers searched the treacherous area for hours before locating him. He had died on impact from craniocerebral trauma. The incident led to immediate changes in how competitions monitor wind conditions in complex terrain. The James Bond Stuntman tragedy. On August 14, 2013, Mark Sutton stood on the skid of a helicopter over the ridge of Les Grandes Hautanes in Switzerland. Sutton, a 42-year-old stuntman famous for parachuting into the London Olympics opening ceremony as James Bond, prepared to exit. This was not a high-pressure stunt. It was considered a warm-up jump for a 3-day wingsuit event. Sutton jumped with a friend, planning to fly a line along the mountain ridge. He exited at 10,800 feet. The view from the air can be deceptive. Snow and rock reduce contrast, making it difficult to judge the steepness of a slope. Sutton angled his flight to follow the contour of the terrain. He was traveling at approximately 125 miles per hour. At that speed, the margin for correction collapses. As he flew, he maintained a line that brought him close to the ridge. He misjudged the gradient. The slope was not falling away as fast as he was descending. The ground rushed up to meet his glide path. At that speed, the time to react is measured in milliseconds. There was no space to pull up. Sutton impacted the ridge while in full flight. The collision was instantaneous and catastrophic. His parachute remained undeployed. DNA testing was eventually required to formally identify the remains due to the severity of the impact. The tragedy highlighted that in wingsuit flying, a so-called routine warm-up jump carries the same lethal geometry as a world record attempt. The Yosemite Twilight incident. On the evening of May 16, 2015, Dean Potter, a 43-year-old climbing legend, and his flight partner, 29-year-old Graham Hunt, hiked to Taft Point in Yosemite National Park. They stood 3,500 feet above the valley floor. Because base jumping is illegal in the park, they waited for dusk to avoid detection by rangers. The light turned a dim blue-gray, turning the granite walls into flat silhouettes. They planned to fly through a specific V-shaped notch in a ridge known as Lost Brother. They had cleared this gap before. Potter jumped first, and Hunt followed seconds later. They entered freefall and transitioned into a glide. The line felt familiar until the shadows erased depth. As they approached the notch, the fading light obscured their depth perception. The visual cues needed to judge closing speed were hidden in the shadows. Their glide ratio was insufficient to clear the rising rock. Potter realized that the gap was tighter than it appeared. He attempted to maneuver, but at flight speed, the air provides resistance, not immediate change. Both men struck the rock face near the notch. Neither deployed a parachute. The impacts were instantly fatal due to blunt force injuries. A review of GoPro footage later confirmed that the lack of light had made the precise calculation of the glide path impossible. The couple's tragedy. On August 19, 2013, Mario Richard, a 47-year-old professional jumper, stood at the exit point on Sas Perdoi in the Italian Dolomites with his wife, Steph Davis. They were newlyweds and frequent flight partners. The routine was familiar. Davis would jump first, land, and watch Richard follow. Davis exited, flew her line, and deployed her parachute safely. She landed in the designated zone and then turned to watch the sky, waiting for her husband's canopy to appear. Richard jumped moments after her. He attempted a proximity line, intending to fly close to a vertical rock wall. Proximity flying requires the pilot to thread a narrow corridor between lift and collision. Richard miscalculated the distance to the cliff face by meters. At that distance, air compression near the wall can disrupt stability. He drifted just slightly off his intended vector. He struck the cliff wall while still in full flight. He died instantly from massive trauma. On the ground, Davis waited for a parachute that never opened. The silence in the valley confirmed the outcome long before rescue teams arrived. The Chamonix tree incident. On August 22, 2016, Alexander Polli stood at the exit point on the Brevan Range in Chamonix, France. The 31-year-old Italian-Norwegian wingsuiter prepared to jump. Polli was a viral sensation in the sport, famous for his extreme precision. He was the first human to successfully fly a wingsuit through a small rock archway in Spain known as the Batman Cave. He was not a reckless amateur, but a flyer who specialized in threading narrow gaps. Polli leaped from the exit point at 1,500 meters. He initiated a flight line intended to spiral close to the terrain. The maneuver required him to bank sharply while maintaining speed. As he descended, he lined up his trajectory with a grove of trees. In precision flying, so-called target fixation can occur, where the pilot looks at the obstacle that they're trying to avoid, and then the body inadvertently steers toward it. As Polli banked, his altitude margin disappeared. He did not slam into the forest. He merely grazed the top of a single tree. At 100 miles per hour, even a light impact with foliage is catastrophic. The contact disrupted the airflow over his wing. The suit lost lift immediately. He entered an uncontrollable tumble, striking the ground moments later. Although he was conscious when rescuers arrived, the internal trauma from the impact was too severe. He went into cardiac arrest and was pronounced dead at the scene. The sky is not a playground. It is a vacuum that demands perfection. For these flyers, the price of a single miscalculation, a stitch, a shadow, or a gust of wind, was the difference between a memory and an ending. Life is fragile. Treat today like it matters.